everyone. Welcome to week 2 of Jude. My name is Erica Volkers. I'm the content director at the Foundry Church, and I'm joined by Pastor Eric Volkers.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, Eric. So today we have no opening story because we have a huge challenge on our hands. Last week we went 4 rounds, and this week we're going 9.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Nice.
Let me just give you a little explanation. I really love Jude because he works in threes, which to me is such a complete style. Last week we had 3 examples of those who dismiss God's order.
Oh my gosh, would that mean you're a little odd?
Yeah, probably.
Like 3, a little odd.
Who dismiss God's order to satisfy their own sinful or corrupt desires. So they didn't trust that God had their best in mind. They sought to go against his design. We talked about the rebellion of the Israelites, the fallen angels, and the men of Sodom. So it's my quick note. If you haven't listened to that one yet, please go back and listen to week 1 and then join us again for week 2. So this week, we're going to hit 3 more examples from the Old Testament: Cain, Balaam, and Korah. And then Jude follows that up with something that really speaks your language, Eric.
Okay.
Lots of metaphors.
Lots
of metaphors.
I like the metaphor like the sands love the sea. Was that him? Okay.
We're gonna touch on blemishes, shepherds who feed only themselves, clouds without rains, trees twice dead, wild waves foaming with shame, wandering stars. A lot. And it's in just 3 verses. So
Golly. Well, today, since we're going to cover verses 11 through 13, I'm going to just go ahead and read it now. Are we good with that?
Yeah.
Here we go. Woe to them. It's tough when you start out with just woe. That's your opening word. Not like whoa, but woe to them. They have taken the way of Cain. They have rushed for profit into Balaam's error. They have been destroyed in Korah's rebellion. These people are blemishes at your love feasts, eating with you without the slightest qualm. Shepherds who feed only themselves. They are clouds without rain, blown along by the wind, autumn trees without fruit, and uprooted, twice dead. They are wild waves of the sea, foaming up their shame, wandering stars for whom the blackest darkness has been reserved forever.
What in the world does that mean? We're going to talk about it.
Good morning.
So thankfully, this week we are joined by Pastor Doug Swink.
Hey, what's up?
Hello,
Doug, welcome to the ring.
Thank you.
All right.
Ready to go.
Yeah. So here's what will happen. I'm going to give a little background on what Jude refers to in his letter, all those things we just mentioned. And then you guys are going to have a couple of minutes to discuss that portion further. You'll have a bell that cuts you off.
Will we hear that bell?
Yeah.
No?
Here we go. So as soon as, like we shared in the welcome, there's a ton here. So keeping with the 3s, we're going to do 9 rounds.
Okay.
So let's start with round 1. Jude first refers to Cain. They've taken the way of Cain. In Genesis, we have the story after the fall of Adam and Eve, and they have sinned. Now they are living outside of the garden, and they have children. They have twin boys, Cain and Abel. And the story picks up where Abel brings an offering to the Lord. He was a hunter, so he brought some wild game, the best of what he had, to the Lord. And then it says Cain brought some of his crop.
So did I hear you correct? Abel was a hunter.
Yes.
I thought you said Cain. Did I mishear that?
Yeah,
Maybe.
I think she said
Okay.
Abel.
Yeah.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I'm
Cain,
sorry, I messed
Cain was a
up.
farmer.
Okay.
So Abel brings a sacrifice to the Lord, and it pleased the Lord. The Lord was pleased with what he brought. And we don't know all the context clues. We don't know if that's because it was the best of his flock or the first that he had, or because it was, Abel's heart recognized the Lord that, when Adam and Eve sinned, God killed an animal and dressed them in the clothes. That was the sacrifice appropriate to God for sin.
Right.
But what we do know is that Cain brought some. And what we can read from the story is that Cain's heart really wasn't in it, and God wasn't pleased with Cain's offering. And rather than Cain using that as like a point of, okay, I'm going to take this conviction, why wasn't God pleased with it? He just kind of dug his heels in, and he was mad. He wasn't mad at himself for what he brought. He was mad that God liked Abel's more, and he was jealous of his brother. He ends up luring his brother into the field, and we have our first murder in the Bible. And after that, God goes and he approaches Cain, asks where Abel is, and Cain has the audacity to say to God, am I my brother's keeper? Kind of like, why are you asking me? What do I know about it? And God just confronts him and says, his blood is crying out to me from the ground. And Cain is then punished for what he has done and sent away in exile. So when Jude is talking to his church, writing this warning letter, and he says, these people, we talked about that reference last week, these people, that they've taken the way of Cain. What does he mean? Round one.
It's funny. Isn't that just so humanity? We can't even make it out of one family,
Right.
and they're already killing each other.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that I was reading somewhere, and that was just I was like, that is so true. It's our heart. Adam and Eve tried to hide from the all-seeing God, and then their son kills and tries to basically ignore it, thinking God didn't see it.
Right. Right.
It's so who our sinful human nature is.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me, and I think it just really goes. I think it was the fact that it wasn't Cain's offering that wasn't acceptable to God. It was Cain's heart posture that wasn't acceptable to God. Because, and I think, I've said this, but Cain saved the best for Cain.
That's well said.
Yeah. And so because he chose to bless himself, he lost the blessing of God. And that to me is like so epic. There's trade-offs in everything that we do. And when I choose me, I'm not choosing God. And so I think I'm getting the full blessing when really I'm losing out on the full blessing. But it goes back to the fact that for Cain, it was just about him choosing him. It was his heart posture, that it was all for him. And I, even what you said, Erica, as far as like, just like being angry at God. Isn't that how we are? Like, we make a choice. How
dare you accuse me of what I did?
Right, exactly.
Well, first his brother. First blamed Abel, and then God,
Well, but here's the thing.
Like
I think I hadn't. What's fun about these discussions is you'll say something and it like shows a parallel to me. We didn't get out of the first family, as you said, Doug, before we're killing each other. We didn't get through the first generation of the church. And it's already turning inwards and going the way of Cain. And it shows that human nature, the human heart is sinful above all else. And if we don't submit our nature to God, no matter your intentions, you go the way of Cain. And when he says that, I'm like, what is the way of Cain? And to me, this is how I read Cain. It's an arrogant defiance that is like, how dare you accuse me of what I did?
Right.
Like what he's saying to God in my mind is so much more than am I my brother's keeper. He's saying, don't judge me. I'm my own man. I did what was best by me. You didn't like my offering. Like, kind of like, who cares? It's so
arrogant,
petulant, and arrogant.
Very
and
word.
So, it was a fun word, right? Petulant.
Yeah.
But I think that is my read on Cain, and then I look at the.
There's our time.
Oh,
Nice. Nice, guys.
Isn't that funny? Because I'm ready for something to come back. It's like, no.
Yeah, I'm gonna punch you so hard next round.
Awesome. All right, let's move on to Balaam. This story just starts even hilariously, but we've got Balaam. We would kind of qualify him as a seer. What happens is the Israelites are huge and they're moving into the area, and the Moabites are pretty panicked about it. The Midianites more are just vengeful about it. They want to destroy him, and so they kind of group together and they're like, hey, let's hire this Balaam. I think in devotions last week we called him the prophet for profit.
Ooh,
yeah.
Well played.
Let's hire Balaam and get him to come curse these people. So they promise him money. On the way there, Balaam is on his donkey, and all of a sudden his donkey just refuses to move. And so Balaam beats the donkey, and then it happens 2, then 3 times at one point, even where he's in a really narrow place with the wall, and he gets smashes his foot against the wall, and he's ticked off, and he beats the donkey. And so God decides to open the donkey's mouth, and we have talking animals in the Bible, and the donkey says, why are you beating me these 3 times? Like, have I ever acted this way before? Have I ever been not good to you, master? And God opens Balaam's eyes and allows him to see that the angel of the Lord was standing there, and the angel of the Lord was going to kill Balaam for going to bring these curses. Balaam still ends up going, but then when he gets to the kings, he lets them know, hey, if this God will not let me, I cannot curse these people. He kind of forewarns them. They're like, well, you just tell us what to do. So they do all these offerings. He opens his mouth, blesses God's people. Happens 3 times, in fact, where every time they're hoping, I don't know why they kept trying the same thing, hoping for a different
definition of insanity.
Yeah.
But they kept promising him this money, asking him to curse the Israelites, and every time he spoke a blessing over them. And he said to the king, "Look, I told you, I can't do anything, except what the Lord gives me to say." And in fact, he then goes on to bless them 4 more times. And then he leaves on his way, and we kind of think the story ends there. But what we find out later in Numbers, I think it's 31, we get a little bit more context clues. Because I remember growing up wondering, like, why is Balaam talked so bad about in Jude, in Peter, in Revelation by Jesus himself, when, like, I don't know, it kind of seems like he went to curse them and he didn't work. And
he completely, every time, he's like, I can only tell you what the Lord says.
Right. And he blesses them.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I remember being like, is he a bad guy or a good guy? But Numbers 31 gives us a little more insight. And what happens is Balaam decides, I still want that money. So he goes to the king of the Midianites and he says, look, I can't curse them, but they can actually curse themselves because their God said, if you worship idols and do these things, a curse is going to fall on you. So this is what you need to do. You need to get the foxiest Moabite women you can, get them close to the camp, lure the guys over, and then they will, they will have relations with these women that'll cause them to worship the Baal of Peor, and then they will be under a curse. And then, then I can get my money. So Balaam gives him kind of this subversive plan. So when Jude is talking about Balaam, he says, they have rushed for profit into Balaam's error. When he's talking about these people in his church, what's he talking about?
I'm going to tell you what, it's really amazing when you read... if you just read that in Jude, Balaam's story is so layered.
Yeah.
I mean, he's mentioned in Numbers, Deuteronomy, Revelation, as you said, 2 Peter, and in Joshua.
Yeah.
He's mentioned in, so like if we just read that and which is what a lot of us do, and don't do the research to go, who is Balaam? Right? Yeah. Then we look at it and go, well, whatever he did, I don't want to fall into that. Right? And we don't know what it was.
But he's very present. Yeah. And I think that's the thing that I think has always been my curveball with him, is he gets talked about a lot. And I think that's where Jude, he knows, again, in our last podcast, we talked about the deep family history that they were. And in the family history, they know what Balaam is.
Yeah, he can just make a side comment, and they're like, oh, yeah, Balaam.
Right.
That's like, it's like any of your, because we all have an arch nemesis in life, whoever it is. They don't have to be. They are so unnamed.
Helix Highline.
Oh.
What?
Wow.
Oh.
Okay.
We're going there.
We'll talk about that later. But you just say their name, and everybody in the family, that one eyebrow goes up. That's what I think he's doing here. He's talking about how he tricked Israel to walk into a curse.
Right.
And he did it for profit, which I'll just say in our modern context, the whole prosperity and like they rush into Balaam's error for profit. The gospel is not a for-profit enterprise. And Jude is really, I think, making that very clear.
Yeah, it's interesting because he went against God's people. And I mean, when you read it initially, I'm like you, it's like, wow, I don't understand what the problem is.
Yeah. Who is this guy?
Yeah, because he's like talking to God. And he was, in the research I did, he is recognized as like one of the greatest, most powerful Gentile prophets in that time, and supported by like Josephus and other writers, right? And when you first look at him, it's like, wow, he's doing it. Yeah. But then when you read in Joshua and in, Deuteronomy and 2 Peter, it's like, dude, this guy, like, A, he died for what he did, and B, he purposely led God's people away for a profit. And it reminded me of what Jesus talked about when he was talking about the Pharisees, that it was all about personal gain. It was about pride.
Yeah.
It was about how they were
Yeah.
perceived and looked at.
Yeah.
And Jesus said they're like whitewashed tombed with
Yeah.
dead men's bones on the inside.
Yeah.
They're like a cup that's been
Oh, there's
cleaned.
your time.
Come on.
So on your point. Gosh,
No, it's
that
good.
feels so much like when Grossmont thinks they're going to win and Helix dominate. Okay,
These
sorry.
two are high school
Did you say
rivals.
baseball?
I did.
Oh, I did.
All right. Okay, sorry.
Interesting though, like we talked last week about the spies incited the other people not to believe, and here we've got Balaam inciting,
Yeah.
to sin,
Inciting
this
Moab to-
subversive.
yeah.
But his start is so amazing where he speaks blessings over
Yeah.
Israel
Yeah.
and ends up just being a
I
dirtbag.
would actually still like that cash. So,
Can I not say that?
No, I think it's good.
all right, guys, nice round. Before we move on to round
Thank you.
3, keeping with the boxing theme, I've got a question for you guys. You got 20 seconds each.
Okay.
So, get to your corners, get ready, hydrate.
Now it's time for verses.
Who would win in a boxing match? Winston Churchill or Dwight Schrute?
No, Churchill, easily. That's I think. I mean,
Hey,
he's
you got 20
smart,
seconds.
led a country through a war. Dwight couldn't even lead his team through the office. So that's,
You're right. You don't even need 20.
no,
Right?
I'm
Okay.
good.
All right.
I would just say it. We will fight on the landing grounds. We will fight in the streets. Like, we will never surrender. And here's the thing. Ironically, he would beat Dwight Schrute.
Yeah.
He's a beet farmer. Yeah,
Oh.
no, yeah.
Very
And
nice.
Dwight had a good one, too, to the abdomen. Remember when he punched Michael? Michael's like,
Yes,
"Ah,"
yeah.
and he like tore the blinds down.
Yeah.
But there's no way Dwight holds up against,
And what it wasn't with
British
Churchill's
Bulldog.
line, all I have to give is blood,
Blood,
sweat,
sweat,
tears. Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know. I
That's
think
an
his
epic
punching was
line.
his rhetoric, though, and stuff. I don't know if it was
Yeah.
physical, but
Yeah,
all right.
it's true. And he hydrated differently. Churchill was a
Very
drinker.
true. Yeah.
Champagne for breakfast.
He did. He had champagne and whiskey for breakfast. He's like, oh, let's
Oh, my.
fight the Nazis. And I'm like, going after it.
That'll make your Captain Crunch taste different.
All
Right?
right. Let's get on to Korah's Rebellion, round 3.
Yeah.
Okay,
Bring
so Jude says to them, this is, by the way, we're still only in verse 11. He says, he gives them another reference, another hyperlink, like we talked about back into their
term.
past. Yeah, I stole that from the Bible Project.
Yeah, it's so good.
He gives them another one, and he says, they have been destroyed in Korah's rebellion. So what happened here is, again, Moses with the Israelites in the wilderness. He's been leading them for a long time. And what happens is there's some other people Korah, who are like, hey, wait a minute. We're of the tribe of Levi too. You've just set yourself up as God's leader. Why can't it be one of us? You've chosen this. And I love it. It says Moses fell on his face before the Lord. And I think he was just so tired. He did not ask for this job. It was given to him. And God is furious with this. And what happens is there's kind of this challenge set up of like, bring your censers with incense, but God is going to choose who his leader is, who he's appointed. And then you've got these 3 who won't even show up for that outside the tent of meeting. And they're like, no, it's that same defiance. Like, who made you the leader? Why can't it be us? And Moses says, you know what? We'll let God show. If God destroys you in a way that's never been done before, then you were in the wrong. If he doesn't, if everything's fine, then, maybe you're right. Maybe I shouldn't be the leader. And the earth opens up and swallows these people and shuts back up on top of it.
That's a different way.
Yeah, brand new way. And so Korah and 2 other family groups are destroyed. And then you have these other 250 people who had kind of bought into this incense challenge. And they, rather than seeing that happen and being like, wow, we shouldn't have come up and opposed the person that God's put in charge, they're like, look at what you've done to us. You're going to kill all of us. So they're still griping. And so then God destroys all 250 of those people. So why is he saying that these people sneaking in, causing trouble in this brand new Jerusalem or Galilee area church in Jude's time, why is he saying they are destroyed in Korah's rebellion? Why is he making that connection?
So I think the connection is made because if we look back at this story, Israel was a fledgling community. They've come out of slavery. They really don't have an identity. And Korah wanted to be the identity of the people. He looked at Moses and is like, these are Moses's people. This is my read on it. And they follow him. But I'm a leader too, and they should be my people. I want that. And his rebellion, I think, was to exalt himself and make them a people gathered to his name. And God said, you are going to be my people. Your leaders aren't the big deal. I'm the center of the community. Your prophets and judges the prophets will lead you, but I'm the center.
Yeah.
My name is the middle, not Moses's. And I think what we have in Jude is a group of people who want this to be their movement, their church, their influence. They're the really spiritually wise ones or whatever. And it's going to be their name.
Knowledge.
Yeah. And so that's my read on it is God is saying this is a people under my name, not yours. But that's my read on it.
No, I think that's accurate. I think that, for Korah and for the people that were following him, it is so who we are as far as like, we all want to be recognized. But it was like a prideful thing for them. Right. And it was a look at me, follow me. And it totally reminds me of the Lion King with Scar. When he talks to the hyenas and he says, follow me and you'll never go hungry again. And then you look at the result and the land's damaged.
The elephant graveyard,
right?
Yeah.
And that's how that ends up, where people are they think they can do it. They've never had to make the decisions. They've never had people follow. And Jesus talked in John 17 about prayed for us to be united.
Yeah.
This group of people, they're dividers. They come in and they divide people. They're divisive. Hey, listen, he's not really doing a great job. Look at that. Follow me and you'll never go hungry again.
Yeah.
But don't we see that in the early church? People are like, I was baptized by Apollos.
Right.
I was baptized by Paul. And I think they're like, you were baptized into Christ.
Right.
Knock it off.
Right.
And there's this exasperated sense of you keep wanting to follow people.
Right.
But just because God appoints a leader for a season, there is a God who is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Amen.
And that is who we follow. And though God gives us faithful mentors, leaders, pastors, teachers, and different things and prophets, it was their name isn't the ministry. The name of Jesus is the ministry. And I think that's where Jude's going back to. So I super agree. Like Jesus in that high priestly prayer, he wanted...
There's our time. You finish your thought. Finish your thought.
Yeah.
Jesus in the high priestly prayer wanted us to know where our rally point is. It's him. It's at the wounds of Christ that he would take on. And they hadn't seen the wounds yet, but afterwards, they knew who their rallying point was, but that immediate next generation was like, boy, I like Peter and Paul.
Right. Can I throw something out real quick, just quickly? So if you look at all three of these people that Jude mentions, they were all self-centered. They were all prideful, and their decisions led not only to their death, but to the deaths of a lot of other people.
A lot of people.
Yes.
And it's like, it goes to your point, Eric, as far as choose wisely who you're following. Are you following Jesus or are you following a person? And that's a lot of the problem in the church today, and it's like, well, I follow this pastor. I follow this. And it's like, no,
don't do that.
I follow Jesus.
Yeah. It even brings you back to the beginning of Jude's letter. He didn't say, Jude, a brother of Jesus, grew up in the same house, know the guy. And he said, a servant of Jesus,
Yeah.
That's great.
Know Jesus' favorite meal because I'm his brother.
Right.
Right.
All right. You guys are doing awesome at this.
Yeah, I feel
All right.
good.
We are on to round 4, blemishes. These people are blemishes at your love feast. So there is a little bit of a better word, but I do think it has a connection. It'd almost be better if you think of blemishes, the translation would be better as the rocks that come up out of nowhere that a ship gets shipwrecked on. But when you think of puberty, blemishes also come up out of nowhere and ruin your day.
They ruin your day.
I don't think about that often.
Right, yeah. Well, it's because we're
Right, because
we're
it was
old.
bad for me.
Yeah, you're just
It's a scar.
He says, again, we remember that phrase, these people are blemishes at your love feast. What is he saying?
I want to hear more about the rocks that come up. Because I've never heard that.
I was so excited about that.
Oh, sorry.
No. So it's interesting because a lot of translations say blemish. But when you do the research, actually, I think it's 2 Peter and Jude. Both are kind of almost inspired. Nobody knows whether it's Jude
really
inspired
similar.
Peter or the other way, right? But there's a word play. There's possibly a word play that Jude is actually using here because the two words for blemish and for rock are very close to each other. And so that word really could be, and I think maybe is more of the translation of the rock. And like you said, Erica, it's a rock that sticks out into the water and is treacherous to nearby ships. And so you look at it, and it's why in the New English translation, they didn't translate it as blemish. They translated it as dangerous reef. And,
you don't see it.
Right.
You don't know it's there. Yeah.
Right. And this person looks like a rock or a pillar, as I was learning this. They look like a rock or a pillar in the community, but when other believers get too close to them, their faith gets shipwrecked.
Oh, that's
really
good.
I almost want to leave it right there because that's just it.
Yep.
That's just it. I mean, if we go on the fruit of someone's life, and if people are shipwrecked, and their lives cease to produce fruit, but they only have death and decay, like there's something in that. And I do think like blemish, there's a superficial aspect of it. They make what is lovely ugly.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, should we just give a little context what they meant by the love feasts?
Sure.
Yeah. Oh.
No, you.
Okay. So they're speaking of when they would gather together to celebrate the Lord's Supper. We kind of see reference to this in Corinthians too, when he's like, look, your people are coming and the ones who have a lot are like getting drunk and overeating, while you've got poor people that are like hungry and not getting to participate. And they're just kind of, they're doing what was given as a gift to them of grace. They're doing it for self-indulgence. And so that's what he means by the love feast, when they would gather as the community.
Right. So they're actually profaning the remembrance of the body given and the blood shed.
And they're tripping up other people.
Yeah.
In what they're doing.
And I think that's, he goes on, there's further allusions we'll get into that I think are frightening and convicting even in my life. So I thank you for the thing on the reef where people get shipwrecked. That actually helps me. I don't want to add any more because
I think it goes back to what we were saying in the previous one, talking about those three guys. Be careful who you're following.
Yep.
Follow Jesus, live. Follow a person, shipwreck.
Yeah,
right.
That's
absolutely.
what it leads to.
Right. And it's so true. And that's why, like at the Foundry, we're a Bible church. We
Amen.
teach the Bible. There are people and personalities.
There's our time.
Oh, yeah.
Good. I mean, if we would have
time's
stopped
up.
it right after Doug did the shipwreck, it would have been like before the time, so it was like a knockout. Oh,
If
you had
you
a
stop
knock.
it, you get a knockout.
But we kept swinging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
Wow.
nice. All right, round 5. So he talks about shepherds who feed only themselves. So this is a reference to a couple things. Way back to Ezekiel speaks about shepherds who they're supposed to be leading and guiding the people, but they just are worried about themselves, providing for themselves, indulging in themselves, using their positions given by God to serve themselves. And that's why Jesus was so counter. He came as the good shepherd, and Jesus references it. He's like, a hired hand, wolf comes, they're going to run away.
Right.
But the good shepherd would lay down his life for his sheep. So these are not good shepherds. These are shepherds who feed only themselves and don't protect the flock from the wolves, maybe even wolves in sheep's clothing. So what's he saying about the church here?
Well, like you said, in the Old Testament, shepherds were highly looked up to. In the intertestamental period, shepherds somehow lost their value in the culture and society in Israel. And in the Old Testament, I mean, you could judge kings. A good king was called a good shepherd. A bad king was called a bad shepherd, right? God calls himself in the Old Testament the good shepherd.
Yeah.
Jesus refers to himself as a shepherd in the New Testament. And when you read Psalm 139, you begin to understand that the job of the shepherd is to provide and protect.
Do you think that's why David was a shepherd first?
Yeah. And you can see it in his example. And so you look at these people, They're not there to provide and protect for those who can't for themselves. They're there to fulfill themselves, to get what they can get and leave the others to fight for the scraps.
But what if we look at it in the sense of like these are nursing babies. These are little lambs that are new in their faith, and you have a shepherd who not only gets them near to the mother to nurse or to care for them, but literally uses them and roasts them for his own benefit. It's this horrible image. What I pulled out of this was what you said, Erica. Jesus makes it clear. He's like, I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. And I think in Jude saying they're shepherds who feed only themselves, there's a cultural juxtaposition of Jesus. They would have known that phrase. They would have heard those words, that he was the good shepherd. And I think Jude is drawing a contrast between them, but then you go deeper into it with the psalm, it seems the whole world just loves. But David's saying something. This is, King David, the Lord is my shepherd.
Amen.
And it's followed by, I shall not want. And if we ever as shepherds leave people wanting more of the spiritual nourishment and truth of God, then we have been shepherds who fed only ourselves. And we have to be cautious. I mean, as a pastor, this verse is my haunt because I never want to be somebody who feeds myself at the expense of the church that God called us to lead for a season, because it's his church, not ours, right?
Right.
So if the Lord is my shepherd and I shall not want, then he's also their shepherd and they shall not want. And we've been called to, as priest and prophet to one another, to literally care for one another as God's sheep. And when he's speaking of these people, he is contrasting the Lord out of Psalm 23, but he's also contrasting Jesus, who claimed the identity David spoke of. That's how, when I read it, I was like, ooh, this is so cool.
Yeah.
And so good. And it shows us a pretty clear identifier on a bad shepherd.
Yeah. Very good. That's our time.
Oh,
It's 3 minutes.
yeah, there we go.
Nailed it.
I like that you brought up the pastoral part, because really a lot of these other examples that he's talking about, most likely this was a house church and they had some people slipping in and kind of trying to usurp whoever was actually leading. But it doesn't mean that this doesn't apply also to leaders of the church.
Yeah.
Being really careful.
Well,
All right.
I think we often speak to people as the church. We talk to each other and we'll say this, like, give points and stuff. But the word of God, their teachers are held to a different standard. And we do have to guard ourselves. I think just personally, like, this is not a word for someone else. This is a word for me. Like, do I feed myself? And in doing so, do I starve others? Am I as generous with them as I hope God is with me?
Yeah.
And that should always be a check and a proof in the heart of a pastor. And I don't know why I'm a little frightened of it, because I'm like, is it because I've done that? Or is it because I know inside of me is a nature that would do that?
Yeah. A healthy
so
fear of the Lord understands that we are our nature.
Yeah, and we're only...
And
yeah.
makes us afraid.
I think it's a great constant check for us who are leaders.
Yeah.
Agreed.
All right, we'll take a little breath, and I'm going to share with you guys a random boxing fact. I purposely, you guys don't have it in any of your notes because I don't want you to know it. I hope you don't already know it.
I hope I do.
Yeah. So,
If you hear me squeak,
so you probably
it's
know
'cause
the
I
first
knew
fight.
it.
So Teddy Roosevelt was kind of an avid boxer. He boxed at Harvard.
Really?
He boxed while he was the commissioner of the New York Police Department.
What a town to box in.
And he kind of made it sound like, oh, I just do it for fitness once he was president. But actually, the White House was basically like Fight Club. He would arrange matches, and it wasn't matches for him to watch. It was matches he participated in.
Go Teddy.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh.
in 1908, he had a match against Dan Tyler Moore.
Mary
And-
Tyler Moore's cousin.
No.
That makes sense.
So Dan landed a punch so hard that he actually detached his retina and eventually went blind in that eye. And Teddy Roosevelt kind of kept this a secret from people. Like, he didn't want them to know that he had lost sight in an eye. But because of that, then he had to use these really strong glasses. And when he was printing his speeches, by the time he was running for his third term, he had to write in such big font that his speech was huge. And so he had that speech folded up with his glasses in a metal case in his pocket, and that is what protected him from the assassination attempt on his life. That's what the bullet hit. So really, this guy blinding him kind of saved his life later.
So we could write a little book called Blinded for Purpose.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think, can
we
we bring back presidential boxing?
Yes.
Like, that'd be, please.
So that was going to be one of my versus questions, like
knock
who
you
would
out.
win,
Yeah.
and I'm like, we can't go there.
Rather than debates, boxing matches.
Boxing. Yeah, so you guys didn't know?
No, I didn't know that.
didn't. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
That
I
is.
mean, what do you do when you literally light the commander-in-chief up so hard that he goes blind?
Right.
He had to be like the guy though that you knew, like obviously he wants to fight. Like he'd be offended if I didn't give my all.
I
So.
think that in our culture today, people would be like, please pick me.
Yeah.
Please pick me.
Yeah,
All right. Awesome. Let's get on to round 6.
that was a good fact.
Yeah. That was fun. So Jude goes on, still talking about these people, and he's got some more metaphors. He says they are clouds without rain, blown along by the wind. We can kind of picture what that means, you know, like you see clouds on the horizon, you know, it gets all dark, people say it's going to rain, right? But then if nothing happens, what is he implying about these people at the church?
So I have this image in my head when in 2019, we were in Zambia and they were in a drought at that time. And do you remember that day? Because it was winter. So it was like 85 degrees, but in the mornings it was like 65. And people like our host, the pastor or something, they were wearing parkas. like they weren't North Face, but they were like that kind of park. And they were so cold. And that one guy, Thomas, who only wore an old fur hood that he had, it was great. And then it would get so hot and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. And I remember one day there was clouds. And everybody's like, there's clouds. Like they were so hopeful that even though it wasn't the rainy season, that it would rain. And that night at the campfire, one of the guys said, I mean, it was disappointing. The clouds just went away. And I had never seen people be so disappointed in that. But, you know, we turn on a faucet and have water. It's different in those villages. And when I think of clouds without rain, they create hope with no intention of satisfying it. And I think that's spiritual abuse, to create a hope for someone in maybe transformation or living a new life in Christ, but they don't ever satisfy that hope with the true gospel. They somehow benefit from it. They're a cloud. They appear to be a blessing, but in the end, they leave you disappointed.
Yeah, this one's convicting to me because there are people who don't keep their word. They overpromise and underdeliver. They, they look the part, right? And they say, I'll be there Friday to help you move. They say, hey, I'm going to help you through this problem. Never make contact with you. And I think in that scenario, you look at it and it's like, man, they make all of it. It's like a cloud in a drought, right? Kind of what you were talking about, Eric, where you see it and you're like, oh, thank God. Finally, we're going to get rain. And it just blows right over, doesn't leave it, and doesn't drop any rain. You think it's going to rain. You believe it's going to rain. You hope it's going to rain. No rain. Yeah. And that's how these people are. They talk a good game. I remember playing Little League, and I played catcher and pitcher. But this one kid, first day, right, team meets everyone. Everyone's like, hey, my name's Doug Swink. I play catcher. And this kid was like, I play catcher. And I'm like, oh. So we got a little competition here. It'll be good. Then I saw him throw, and I'm like, all right, I'm starting catcher. Right?
Right.
And it is that thing where you look at it and it's like people talk big. And that for me is part of the problem with the church. We have to keep our word. We have to be people of integrity. We have to be people who, if we say we're going to be there, we're there 10 minutes early. If we say that we're going to help, then we overhelp. We don't and that was Jesus. Jesus' life was over
delivering.
Yeah. There's our time.
Wow.
Great.
Dang, we're 2 for 2.
Yeah. Proverbs 25:14 says, like clouds and wind without rain is a man who boasts of a gift he does not give. Which I think
We need to keep that in the cast.
Yeah.
That's Proverbs 25:15.
25:14.
25:14. That's a good reference
That
to
is.
have.
That's a scary thought, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it's important.
All right. Then he goes on round 7. You guys you're killing it. You're doing great. He talks about autumn trees, twice dead. And what he's saying by this, there's a few interpretations, but just because we're just coming out of On Your Mark, what it made me think of was the 2 stories with Jesus and the fig tree. Because it's twice dead. What in the world does that mean? And I thought of how, Jesus saw the fig tree, went up to it, it had no fruit. So no fruit kind of means dead. And then he cursed it and he came back later and it was like literally like
Right.
dead,
At the root.
uprooted.
Yeah.
And then I think of the parable of the fig tree Jesus told, where we've got 3 people. We've got the owner of a garden, we've got the gardener, and then we've got the tree. And the owner comes in and sees that the tree is not producing anything. And he's like, cut it down. And the gardener says, no, wait a year. I'm going to dig around it. I'm going to water it. I'm going to fertilize it. Then we'll see. Then if it has no fruit, we'll burn it. We'll get rid of it. We're the tree, by the way. So
You and I are the tree.
these trees twice dead. It's almost like, okay, here, not only did their lives produce no fruit, but there seems to be something in there of like, and even after they've been given a chance, it's still dead. What do you guys see in that, in Jude? Or did you have a different take on that part?
A lot of silence here.
Yeah, no,
No, I just think of twice dead. I think of our earthly death and when we stand in judgment. And that's another terrifying thought, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it kind of goes back to the last 2 that we've talked about. And it's like how we live our lives matters.
Yeah.
How, how we live. Am I a person that is a cloud full of rain?
Yeah.
That is a blessing to the people around me? Am I a shepherd that makes sure that I am, that the flock eats first, and then I will eat whatever's left over?
Yeah.
Right. And it's a scary thought, the whole thing of like, if how I live my life matters and I don't live it right, that whole twice dead thing comes into play.
Yeah. I really read the twice dead aspect, and it drew me back to a thing I'd read from C.S. Lewis when he talked about when in eternity we will look back and our hardship will be his glory because it all led to heaven. And so we will have lived twice. Even the agonies of this life, when God works together all things for good who love him, for those who love him and are called, then it means he weaves together the traumas, the sorrows, the joys, the wins, the losses, the achievements and the failures. And in the end, from heaven's view back, we look back and it's all heaven. He redeems all things. But for those who live apart from Christ, even their living now, when they are in hell, if they choose against Christ and they go to hell, looking back, all the pleasures of this life will be nothing but hell because it ended there. So their end defines their living here. And I'm doing an inarticulate job of quoting Lewis, and I'm sorry for that, but he does this good job of showing how in eternity we see whether we twice lived or whether we twice died. And it's based on where we founded our life in Christ Jesus and being that tree that produces a good harvest. A tree doesn't try to grow apples if it's an apple tree. It does because it's rooted. And I think what he's saying is their roots are in the wrong thing, so they'll never be fruitful in this life and they'll be burned in the next life. And that is so much the life of a Christian. You have to look, is there love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness,
you have to look at the fruit.
faithfulness, and self-control. And those fruits in a healthy tree should be in abundance, not scarcity. And I think he's saying you may look alive now, but you're dead now and you're going to be dead in eternity. You're twice dead. That's how I read it.
That's our time. You know what that makes me think of when you say the twice dead is it says we're dead in our sins. So these people were dead in their sins. They've heard the gospel.
And
they chose death again.
Yeah.
You know, like they're twice dead.
That's
Yeah.
so not.
Okay, I've been waiting for this next one.
Oh, all right.
I'm excited about
Are you
it.
going
I
in?
won't explain too much.
All right.
So Jude goes on, and he says they are wild waves of the sea foaming up their shame. So there's a lot of references to the sea in Scripture, and one I just think I want to put this. Often it symbolizes, that chaos, that darkness. And one thing just to note is when we get to Revelation and there's a new heaven and a new earth, it says in there, and there is no more sea. So there's something about the sea in this Hebrew mind that Jude would have had, and to say they're wild waves of the sea foaming up their shame just kind of speaks of the chaos and blatancy of their sin. So what's he saying here?
Okay, so I did a little research, and
You're so excited.
I am. So Noah, not the character person from the Bible, but the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
You're like, no, you know him?
Yeah, I did
Okay.
talked about him once. But no, so I looked up rogue waves. Have you ever heard of those?
Yeah.
Like rogue waves. And so Noah on their website said that rogues, called extreme storm waves by scientists, are those waves which are greater than twice the size of surrounding waves, are very unpredictable, and often come unexpectedly from directions other than prevailing wind and waves. Most reports of extreme storm waves say they look like, quote, walls of water, unquote. They're often steep-sided and unusually deep troughs. And I thought about that as far as like these rogue waves, these wild waves that Jude talks about, and how people in the church can seem twice the size. Their shame can come out of nowhere. When he talks about rogue waves living in their shame, or foaming up their shame. Yeah. And they're unpredictable, right? And we look at people in the church who maybe have been in the church for 20, 30, 40 years, right? And I've said this for a while. Length of time in the church doesn't equal depth of maturity in a person's spiritual walk. And I think about these people who should know better, who have a wild hair about, don't like the worship songs we sang today, don't like what Eric preached about,
Appreciate that.
on Sunday. Yeah, it wasn't me.
Yeah.
But this whole idea of their life is chaos, right?
Yeah.
In for us as followers of Christ, we're supposed to have peace, right? We're supposed to have rest, right? The Sabbath rest, and all of these things that lead consistently to a life that people look at and go, that's what I want.
Yeah.
And people who live in chaos, who live in their shame, are a poor example of what Christ is calling us to be.
Yeah. So I have this image in my head of the Gulf of Tehuantepec. It's in Central America. It's the only place where there's a gap in the mountains where the wind blows unabated west to east or east to west. And so it just whistles through the Gulf of Tehuantepec headed to the Atlantic. And the seas are so violent. And I was in those seas on the Caribbean Mercy, and I was actually frightened. I was overwhelmed by the monstrosity of the Pacific. I'd never been in that before. And so I was just like, I was really scared, and I was unnerved. And now knowing what I know, like I think of how it says they vomit up their foam, or they whatever. Like, by the way, side note, I ate Cool Whip as a snack when I was in middle school. One time I ate a whole tub of it, and I vomited up my shame, and it was foam.
That's our bell, but keep going.
Okay.
In class, please tell me.
No, it was at home. But what I think when I look at that wild waves, it's reckless, it's destructive, it's pointless, and it's fleeting. It comes and goes, and it doesn't even stay congealed around the same thing. Like if you watch a wave roll through, it goes by, and the water stays behind, and it kind of picks itself up, and it's driven, and it's crazy, and it's pointless. And he is saying, I think he's saying of them that it is only it's causing wreckage, damage, and it takes us off course.
Yeah.
You have to steer into the waves to get through them. Because I remember I asked the captain, why don't we push out further? And he said, you can't turn in these seas. We couldn't take one of these on the beam, which is the side of the ship. He said it would roll her. And I think that's interesting. Shout out to Captain John. But that's interesting because you have to keep your nose in it and push through those, because they are destructive, pointless, but they are fleeting. The wave passes and they may foam up their shame, but we continue on faithfully.
Yeah, and they're the squeaky wheel. Let's remember that we belong to the one who, who controls the wind and the waves. Who
Amen.
can tell them to be still. So
Right.
all right, so moving on to our last round, round 9. Jude references that these people are like wandering stars. So just to give a little background, especially of that Jude Hebrew Bible studier mind, when we throw around when we're reading the Bible, we always say angels. And really, if you think of the heavenly host that God created, we reference this back in Christmas time when we were talking about angels and their roles. The better word would be celestials. So celestial beings. Some are angels, messengers of God. Some are part of the heavenly armies. Some are heralds who bring announcements. Some are worshipers. Some are those who protect and intervene on God's behalf. So there's many different classes and qualifications of angels that we don't understand, but the Hebrews actually expounded on this a lot in some things that are extra biblical that we're not going to go into. But just so you have an understanding, when the Hebrews heard the story of creation and God appointed the lights in the sky to govern, in their mind, it was these celestials. It was a position and a role that they were given. So to say wandering stars, I really think Jude is hearkening back to those angels who were given a job. They were given God's order. We talked about week 1 in Genesis 6, and they rejected the position and place God had given them to do what they wanted to do, in the case of Genesis 6, to have relations with the women. And so a wandering star is someone who has lost their post or abdicated would be the best word. Abdicated their role. All right, guys, last round, go.
All right, so I'm going to hit this. Real quick, I think you're exactly right. That is 100% where Jude is going with this, and he's hearkening deep into the Hebrew mind of what a watcher is, right? And these things, but if you think about these people, they didn't have Google Maps, they didn't have these things. They charted things by the stars. They knew the heavens, and they watched them. Those stars were to give them bearing. Right? They give you bearing and you understand your place. Like when we were in Korea, when we were newlyweds and with the ship, and they talked about the rabbit in the moon. And we were like, you mean the man in the moon? And you look at the moon there and you're like, turns out it's a rabbit. Like it was interesting, but
angle.
that, right? It's a different angle. For them, the stars gave them bearing. So a wandering star is something that gives you a false bearing. And I don't know, that just churns something in me where I'm like, a wandering star is not only useless, it's deceptive, and it leads people into darkness.
Which goes back to those 3 guys.
Yeah.
Like you could not count on them. And like you said, Eric,
it's true.
You look at it and these people, like people will come to you guys, come to a pastor, come to maybe someone when they're on they're at the end of their rope. They're like, well, this person is a Christian. I'll talk to them and see if I can get any advice. That wandering star gives you no position. These people will give you horrible life advice and take you in a different way than what you should be doing. As far as, when you look at Korah and Balaam and Cain, they are horrible stars to follow. They led to death and they led other people to death. And when we as followers of Christ, earlier we were talking about context, right, of scripture and not knowing who Balaam is, but he's mentioned throughout Old and New Testament, and when we don't know the context of who Balaam is, we just look at it and go, I just don't want to be like that guy. Whatever it was, don't want to be like him.
Right.
But when we don't have that context and we go to a person who says, well, don't be like Balaam. Well, what did he do? Well, I'm not sure. Just don't be like him.
Right.
No help. no bearing.
Yeah, I think that's when we started the Foundry Church, I knew what I didn't want us to be. And one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was don't tell me what you don't want to be, tell me what you want to be. And we quit living out of a negative identity and we grabbed onto who we were called to be. And I think that's the thing. There are these people who they haven't figured out what they're called to be, but they want the position and the voice and the influence of something. They want to be a guidepost because that means something to them. That means a lot to me that you would listen to me or something like that, when it shouldn't mean anything to you other than we seek the divine compliment. Well done, good and faithful servant. And a wandering star serves only their own interest. And they move not according to God's order. They move according to their passions, their desires, and their appetites. So I think this all does tie together really good in Jude.
That's her bell. Keep going.
Okay, is it? Okay. I don't know where I was going. I got too excited.
But it sounded
I totally
good.
false start. But I just think for us, it is vital that we remember God's order doesn't betray itself. So if we ever see something wandering out of God's order and it's not working the way God designed, because there is basic design in biology and different things. And when things break order, we are to be faithful to be a guidepost to that, not to speak out in anger or cruelty, but faithful to speak out the truth of God. Because we don't want to be wandering stars because people feel bad if we don't agree. Our agreement is with God first. Sorry, I got a little preachy there.
No, that was good.
All right. Well, that was our final bell. So thank you, Doug, for joining us today.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you to all who listened. And we invite you to come back next week when we encounter Enoch one more time and get a better sense of the fruit of these people Jude keeps referring to. And we finally get some positive news at the end of the letter. So join us next week. Thanks.
Thanks, Erica.
Thank you.